Hello again, friends. We are have one. We have one more speaker for today, and we are back after a short break. Without further ado, let me introduce our next speaker. Is Marek Zilavy. Welcome. He is head of game design at 10 Square Games, and we are really honored to see you today. Thanks for joining us. And as far as I
Thank you
can
very
see,
much. The pleasure
yeah.
is all mine. Sorry, there's a cat also.
Oh, nice get. Oh, can you show it, please?
Uh, Hello, it's
Hello,
Leonard.
Leonard. Nice to see you, Leonard.
It's almost feeding time, so there might be
Oh,
some cat interruptions because
oh,
they're the most important part in this universe.
and alchemy of player motivation. It's
Speaking
some
of
kind connected.
most, s- yeah, that's speaking of most important things in the universe. So I'm very happy to be here. So I guess
Awesome.
we can start.
Yeah, I'm here for you, and I'm giving you the power to rule this stage. So enjoy.
Well, with much power comes much responsibility. Hello, friends, which I know I don't know. I kind of speaking to myself, but I guess there's somebody else. Welcome to my little talk, which is called Alchemy of Player Motivation. Before we start, I already, without even breaking a sweat, I already started to speak about my cat. So yes, there is a danger of cats interrupting our precious work because it's almost fitting there. The second important thing is that you see in the small print, and there will be multiple of these small prints, that this presentation is not only for game designers, and I really mean it because I think not only the theme of player motivation, but also motivation itself can be beneficial to a lot of not only members of people who make games a reality, but also our daily lives. And the third thing is alchemy is not only included in the title of the talk just to make it sound more cooler, although I assume it might be one of the reasons. It also explains my little take on how I understand game design. I will be speaking about it later, so we can get into the details. I When I do these kind of talks, I almost always forget about speaking about myself. So I think I include I by purpose I included this slide and this information because if you understand me how I got here, not only on this stage but also to my current position, it can give you a lot of interesting, valuable context information to what we will be speaking about. So, how did I evolve to this strange bearded guy who is speaking to you right now? So, you see, when we are speaking about ourselves and our position, we can go through the boring stuff like, yeah, how many years we are in game dev, how, the more the better, and how many titles we worked on and how many companies we worked for and so on. But I think it's more interesting to tell a story. What's the journey which we have gone through? And then my journey to kind of frame it led me to become a head of design in 10 Square Games, and the cat is up to it again. I'm sorry, this will be a thing, which is a beautiful position. I always tell it to anybody who asks me what I'm doing, because I'm directly responsible for the growth of our designers, which I would even say with big and beautiful words, responsible for our designers to that they achieve their potential. But how did I get here? You see, my story is sort of a cycle, and it's not a coincidence. I finished my university studies as a teacher, and I studied. Fun fact: I studied philosophy and aesthetics, so I have this tendency to use more words for less meaning. So, in any moment of my talk, you start to get lost. It's me. It's not you. I'm very sorry. I got into the gaming industry with a happy coincidence. And another fun fact, I fairly soon started to do hunting games, which was really completely outside of the of any games which I personally, as a gamer, would like to play. But I'm super grateful for it because I very soon in my career learned to do and design games for other people, for other players. And I think it's one of the essential skills which we need to have as game designers. And I'm still quite shocked how even some senior designers lack of this skill. Uh, I also fairly soon started to do a lot of consultation, so I helped with the bigger and smaller project on different platforms, and even rediscovered my passion to teach or like to present information and to share information and began to do talks. Then, as it goes, I started to ride the Dunning-Kruger curve of confidence beating my skills and abilities, and I thought I quote ate all the wisdom, all the design wisdom in the world, and I had a wonderful, a very intensive affair with free to play, mobile free to play, which once again told me humility, and two things happened. I felt miserably and realized, okay, there's still a lot of things which I need to learn. And from that moment, I know that there's far more what I don't know than I do know. And the second thing is that I immediately felt in love in validation as part of our design processes. And from this moment, although it was not the brightest of my moments in my career, validation was on all the every next steps. The next step led me to become deeper entrenched, or like sinking my teeth deeper into survival games and working more in the AAA/console/PC space. But once again, I try to introduce validation also into these types of teams and projects. I have to say, with the various degrees of let's say success, but survival games, and especially my time in Funcom, taught me one more important thing, and it was the introduction to self-determination theory, which became my next big love, which kind of followed all the steps of me as a game designer. And then eventually, by a mix of luck, sheer boldness, and different kind of very interesting coincidences, I found myself in 10 Square Games with the wonderful mandate to actually start to help others designers to make games. So currently I'm not working per se on any kind of games, but I help others to do their job in the best way I am able and they are able. And it's very, very interesting because my job in TSG kind of converged together a lot of the elements from the past and created this mixture of a perfect store. So here you see kind of this journey finishes the cycle, or the head of design position kind of closes the cycle, and I'm becoming coming back to my teacher roots, which I think never left me. So it's my sort of story. And I promised you to speak a little bit about alchemy. And as I said to you, like validation is for me one of the core component of anything what I try to do in game design. So why am I speaking about alchemy when I want to validate? So the other small print says it: how to validate magic. I think, please take this as some sort of metaphors, and basically half of the slides which I'm presenting to you are making fun. I'm making fun of myself, so it's not all super serious. But you could say that game design is very similar to the alchemical process. It has different kind of perspectives and different things which we are trying to do, or do even without knowing it. So as the alchemical process, game design process, and especially from the free-to-play angle has the scientific perspective. When we use experimentation, we do different hypotheses, we use A/B test. We also share knowledge between our wonderful community as we are doing right now. So we are kind of sort of scientists. There's also this magical perspective, which is once again making a little bit of fun of ourselves, and it's the stuff which we use not in a strictly logical way. There's even something which is called like magical thinking or magical logic, and it's basically interpreting correlation, causation for correlation. So kind of being wrong about them, but it's using the magical power quote as an assumption and a simplification. But even the nature of individual, what I call individual and collective creativity, sometimes it's really pardon, uh, hard to reflect the creative process itself. And then the last perspective is what I call, well, I called it here mystical perspective, which sounds a little bit dramatic, but it's simply about, no matter the project we are working on, we are there as some sort of individual. We come with our hopes, with our dreams, motivation. We sort of always, as when we are passionate about something, and from my experience, 90% people in game dev are passionate. We are forging our legend. We are working on our magnum opus, on the great work. So we are sort of game design alchemist, and because I currently come from a mobile free to play background, or a company which is focused on mobile free to play. In this talk, I give it a little bit of a uh, once again making fun of myself, cynical angle, cynical in the meaning of angle from free to play. So anytime when I need to speak about the more free to play stuff, I will wear the cynical hat, as in the this beautiful picture. Before we start speaking about motivation, I really would like to frame the picture, and I think that the picture can be framed by question. And as the small princess, the right question comes before the right answer. So before we get the right answers, we really need to make sure that we are asking the right question. And welcome to the special feature of my talk, which is so-called bold statements. And there will be multiple of them, and this is the first of them. Bold statement is something which I feel strong about, and it's kind of a cornerstone of how I do game design. But it definitely has some proof to it, but it's more like me as a game designer hoisting my flag. And the first flag which I'm hoisting is things not having whys don't deserve to be in our games. What I mean by that, that everything what we do in any implementation or updating of our game or creating our games from scratch, and they don't, and the elements don't have a direct purpose, which is clearly described, these elements don't deserve to be implemented. This is very important, especially when you are trying to create, let's say, a game as a service, or like a free-to-play game, which has a direct, which has ambitions to be sustainable and systematically successful. This is why in TSG we are trying to focus on this process of defining the right whys, and then jumping to defining the right what's in an intensive way. And this is a little bit of a tease how we do stuff. We defined even 3 workshops which try to help to identify the whys. You see the first one, it's connected to player motivation, and bulk of the information, basically all of the information presented in this talk are connected with this workshop. The second part is when we already identify player motivation, player need, then we need to assess their business potential. These 2 things can help us to define the why, and then we can go to what, And what's really, really important, the what needs to be also properly and effectively scoped, so we can get an answer and validation as soon as possible. So to be true to myself, and previously speaking about like why is it so important to ask why, I will ask why even bother to actually deal with player motivation. What's our motivation to deal with the player motivation and player psychology and all of these things? I dare to think so that there's some form of universal truth to what we do or what we're trying to do in game design, and it's because we design for humans, and the humans have these objective parts of their beings, and part of it's play, and then I think, and or I'm convinced that play evolved be the most efficient way to learn, and then really is universal to surprising number of creatures. If you never binge watched videos of octopuses playing, you should do it just immediately after this talk. Well, maybe even during this talk, but I leave that up to you. I always see fun as some form of motivational chocolate on top of the pile of learning. So what I'm trying to say is here that on the surface, fun and play seems like something self-serving, but it's not exactly the case when you start to go into the details or under the surface. And the funny thing about game design is that the fun is kind of a side effect of when we do our job right. So especially in our early stages and as game designers, I call it intuitive design. We design basically as we see fit in regards our experience. So we design something which could be fun, and this is why I'm super happy that I started to design for other players than myself. But as we mature as game designer, we stop designing just for fun, but we start to design, for different elements which we identify in the bubble of fun. We design for engagement, we design for ownership, motivation, different emotional responses, and so much more. And especially when we need to achieve specific goals with specific designs, we need to stop focusing on just fun and really be very purposeful in our even designing specific mechanics for specific type of engagement. So my bold statement number two: we don't design for fun, we design for motivation and engagement. And small print says motivation combines quality and quantity of engagement, which means that when you are motivated, you're not only play more, but you have also greater time doing it. Before we really get into let's say the more pleasant aspect of player motivation, I think it's really important to speak about why do players churn. Or it's not rocket science that there's definitely something like a too much of a bad thing. And I'm a really strong fan of pragmatic simplification. What it means that we take something really complex and simplify it so it's useful for our daily routine. And I will be speaking both about negative and positive motivational loop, and they are vast simplification, but it's just to have a conversation in regards game design and its game design processes. So, speaking about negative motivational loop, it's simple. When we are unmotivated, we tend to do worse, and when we do worse, we tend to do unmotivated. Once again, I know it's a simplification, but what's the most important part about it? That it's a loop. It kind of fits itself. It starts to burn, so to speak, our motivation, and it starts to when we get into this loop, it's really hard to the deeper we get into this loop, the harder is to get out of it. and it's because one reason, and it's that it's burning a very specific resource which we have as pliers, and it's the patience battery, patent pending. Welcome to my not yet patented and maybe not ever patience battery, which kind of uses some form of which uses this concept simplifies once again scientific research about patient and how it behaves basically as a resource, and just uses the picture of the battery to make the concept scientific research more accessible. And it's simple: patient is a battery and behaves like a battery. So there's a capacity of it, there's a recharge rate, there's some form of depletion rate. What's really important for us as game designers, and I'm using here the word churn, and I will continue using it, but you can understand churn as any moment where players stop playing your game, no matter if it's free to play game or premium game. So anytime when our players, thanks to the negative motivational loop, start to lose patience with our game, there's a rising risk that they will churn our game, that they will stop playing. And the rule is very simple: the more depleted the patient battery gets, the more likely and even volatile churn is. So the more we are able to deplete the patient's battery of the players, the more likely they will just quit our game. And even if we manage to, because of different kind of reasons, deplete the patient's battery completely, there might be even angry and they might be even vocal about it. You see the different parts of the battery have different colors, and it's because they are not even. For example, the green part and the distribution of the colors is just a scheme. It might be different for different people. Some people are like super patient, and some people are really volatile. So the green part is easy, for example, to recharge, and when you are in still in the green, you still have fun in the Euro games. There's a lot of the times something like a point of no return, after which patience kind of drops. It's really to get it back into the green again, and it's sort of like a moment when you start to lose the trust of your players, which is really dangerous, especially for a game as a service. And the deeper you go, not only the danger of losing players is more severe, but also the nature how they quit your game it can be quite as I said, explosive. You know, we have review bombing, we have different kind of strikes and so on. We have all kinds of ways in which our players can be vocal. So that's the patience battery. And now the third bold statement: recharging player motivation recharges the patience battery, which can even mean in the small print rediscovering motivation, creating second chances. So if you have players which start to lose patience with your game, and you find a way once again, a way to their motivation, you realize again what they want to do in the game, what they want the game to be, and you start to harnessing this knowledge, you can start to recharge the patient's battery, almost regenerating it fully. Although from my experience, it's really hard to recover from a point in which players lose faith or trust in your game. So we spoke about the not so fun parts, or like what happens when we do something wrong, and then we start to burn player patience. But now let's speak about the positive aspects about motivation. So why do players stay in the game? Our player spirit let you have fun. Yes, I mentioned negative motivational loop, and positive motivational loop is kind of a sibling of it. And once again, a gross simplification, I know, but for the sake of conversation, this can be very useful. So when we are motivated, we tend to do better. when we do better, we are more motivated. Once again, you see the looped nature of this. And I could stop the talk and this point and just tell you like, yeah, your whole goal as game designers is to keep players out of the negative loop, or even if they get into the negative loop, to help them recover it and just keep them here, and that's it. And we could say goodbye to each other, but that would be really really simplifying it without mentioning the more complex details. And when we are speaking about the positive motivational loop, there's a lot of complexities involved. So welcome to, well, this is not exactly patent pending, but the flower of motivation. This is almost poetic, so it will nicely contrast with the more cynical part of this talk. This is an overview, once again, simplification of the different structures, psychological or behavioral structures, which create the phenomenon of player motivation. There are two main elements. One is the baseline. Second is the dynamic part, the motivation itself. The baseline, or as I pictured it here as the soil, we could call it the soil of player expectation, or everything what the player consider as some form of standards. What's really really important that if there's any problem in the baseline, a lot of the time we are blind or don't pay attention to it. It will affect the dynamic part. It will directly affect the motivation. It's motivation. It's exactly when you're seeding or trying to grow plants, and there's a sickness in the soil, or it's too dry. You will have problems with the plant itself. This exactly applies to baseline and the flower of motivation. So the dynamic part is composed of two things. And once again, I realize that it's quite poetical, but hmm, sometimes I like to be a sweetheart. So the dynamic part is made of the what I call the progression sun, which is basically a combination of predictable growth and novelty, which is new and exciting thing. And then I told you I fell in love with the self-determination theory. So that's there's something which I call the self-determination flower, which consists of competence, autonomy, and relatedness. Don't worry if this doesn't make at all sense for now, because we will be getting into details. So, baseline. As I told you, this is the soil from which the motivation starts to grow. So it's all the things which our players automatically expect, which they take for granted, which they are not ready to discuss or compromise on, not at all. And then a lot of the times all these expectations are not exactly fair, but they're already existing there. So a lot of important part of every relationship is managing expectations. So having healthy, for example, community management, which goes directly in contact with the baseline, can help a lot of the times. The baseline has a lot of elements. I personally divided them in these four categories because they are the most important for the games which we do in 10 square games. So your games can have a different kind of category, so to speak, but I would be surprised if it's completely different. I divided them into fantasy, accessibility, the promise, and the contract. Fantasy is all about what kind of fantasy we paint by the game. So it's kind of a combination of how we present the setting of the game, how we immerse players into the setting, and what their expectation. So example is that we have our most successful game is a fishing game, and our players just expect a fishing game. Don't expect a game in which you shoot fishes with a laser gun, although it might sound super cool for me. If this would be the case and we would put this into our game, we would alienate our players. Well, and very likely their motivation to play would kind of almost disappear. The second part of the baseline is accessibility, and this is really a lot of the times a very almost like invisible element of what we do. It's a kind of combination of like what's the technical stability or performance of our game, how often we interrupt players' sessions by downloads or updates, or even what kind of friction or pressure puts our user experience or even UI on the players. And we as game developers tend to get desensitized, like kind of blind to these things because we are in daily exposure to them. But as I told you, like in the patience battery, the lower the patience of a player gets, the more likely player can get triggered to actually churn the game. So imagine a moment when player gets home, they had a terrible day and they just want to play. They took out the mobile phone and they want to just play, catch few fishes. They start a game and suddenly an update hits them. So they are already low in the patient battery, and in this case they are very very volatile, so they can be triggered by small things. So it's kind of funny, but we can potentially, for example, pay with retention for any kind of updates of the game which we do, especially when it's not in a good technical shape. Then we have promise and contract. They are more quote esoteric because they are more about the relationship which we establish with the players. I always think about our games as some sort of relationship between developers and the player base. The promise is all about trust and maintaining your trust, keeping your word, and kind of keeping the relationship fresh and flowing. And as in all relationship, trust is one thing, but also there's the tiny thing which we often forget, and it's kind of the surprise to others. The contract is all about being fair, and we have this terrible word pay to win, but a lot of the times in a lot of free to play games, about also in other games, pay to win is just the contract with the players sign, and they're okay with it. They accept the rules of the game. What's really really important here is how consistent the rules are, and even if we as game developers or like community managers or whoever is doing decisions which directly influence player experience, keep to the same rules. So if, for example, players don't feel safe in our game and they feel like we are trying to scam them and cheat them of money, it has direct motivational implication. So that's the baseline. And now let's speak about the sun. So, but before we speak about the grow with novelty, I need to also mention why is novelty mentioned there. And it's because of a simple thing, and it's one of our human superpowers, and it's the superpower to get used to almost everything. It's called hedonistic adaptation, and I dare say so that it's one of the ultimate enemy of any service games. What it means that you can have dozens and hundreds of hours of clean progression through your beautiful game systems, but if you don't introduce something which is unexpected, which refreshes the experience, what happens? Players will just get used to it. Hedonistic adaptation will hit them, and it has different let's say speed for different kind of players, but maybe slowly but sure they will churn, or for some players, and it happened to me for several times, the kind of immersion bubble just pops because I'm finally you just look on yourself like, what are you doing? You're spending so many hours in this game which doesn't have any kind of sense, and you just get away. So this happens when you have for example, there was a surge of open world games in the last years. I think it's getting down because the formula stopped working, Kov, the Assassin's Creed franchise, Kov. And it was exactly this reason, because more doesn't mean that you will have more fun. You need also novelty. And what we have with grow with novelty, the sun is shining without any clouds. And basically, when you have growth with novelty, you have the best from both worlds. You have a nice flowing progression. By the way, flowing progression is pun intended, as you see on the picture. Predictable progression is very good for creating this kind of float states or float like states. But to keep things more exciting and recharging, even the patience, or even the whole experience, you have this kind of novelty spikes. And exactly this is where novelty is really really great for. It's very proficient in recharging patience, because when you start, your player base starts to lose patience with your game, and suddenly you do an unexpected update or a new expansion pack or something which can reinvigorate revigorate their motivation to play. It can have wonders on your player base. And now, finally, the self determination framework. As I said, I'm really a big fan of pragmatic simplification in the service of using it in our daily work. So, this is once again a really, really simplified version of the self determination theory. And what's really important, we will be speaking about three aspects, which are mentioned also here, but I will go into details on later slides. But not all of the players need to have all of these aspects in equal measure. It's always about the personal configuration of specific personas. It's also about specific features. You have a combat system which is mostly about competence and growing your skill, and it can have a tiny social component, but it's not the essential part. What's really important is that we need to maintain a holistic overview of our game, and then maintain an overview of like how the player motivation flows through the game as a whole. And what are these wonderful three words? Competence, or growing your skill; autonomy, making meaningful decision; or relatedness, connecting with others. And my cats once again help me a lot to demonstrate the point. So we will be first speaking about competence. Competence is three things. One is, just the simple enjoyment in getting better. And a note about smoke and mirrors, especially in computer in game design and computer games. It doesn't actually matter if your players really getting better or they just think it. Sometimes we need to mask things. So it's the enjoyment of getting better. It's the enjoyment of executing your mastery. So basically, when you just do cool stuff in your game, it feels really really good. You feel competent. And the third thing, which is once again very important when we are speaking about progression, novelty, and growth, it's not only what you already learn, but what you can learn, what you can still learn, how much there still is what you can master. And as my dear cats demonstrate on this picture, they are flat cats, so they are not exactly used to go out, but they practice their competence on climbing on a tree in our yard. The second is autonomy, and it's simple as the ability to set your own path. Once again, it doesn't matter, especially in computer games, if you really have a decision or it's just a illusion of a decision. What matters, you need to see the decision as meaningful. It can be a big decision, it can be a decision about life and death of a character, or it can be even smaller decision. What really means here, what really fuels here the motivation part is the meaning of the decision. A lot of games quite struggle with this aspect, because like no matter how complicated or complex we do the games, they are closed systems. So them having actually ability to do meaningful decisions is very fairly limited. But sometimes we are such fascinatingly weird creatures that sometimes for humans, maybe even from cats, the most meaningful decision is actually sacrifice autonomy. So you put your ability to decide upon something away, and it really highlights your autonomy motivations. Or the cats decide to actually sit still and be let be pet. And on this picture, Leonard demonstrates his autonomy on sitting constantly meowing for 10 minutes because he wants to go out, and also doing it on the exact crossroads of multiple doors, so he's always in the way. The last but not definitely least, it's relatedness, which is wonderfully complicated word to pronounce it. And it's simple as emotional connection to others. And once again, smoke and mirrors. It really doesn't matter if it's real people, imaginary creatures, or just fantasies. My hypothesis is that what really creates the relatedness and the emotional connection is immersion into feeling how are you really connecting with somebody. We all had really strong moments in any kind of stories which we, for example, experienced in books to fictional characters. It also doesn't mean that it needs to be positive attachment. It can be also negative one. So, for example, competition and feeling competitive with others is a wonderful example. And relatedness is not only about extroverts. It has both introvert and extrovert dimensions, or I like to call them. Introvert people are like to be connected deeply with a smaller number of people or characters or creatures. An extrovert prefer less deep connection but with bigger number of people. Which brings us to the bold statement number 5. To stay motivated, we need to feel growth and novelty in competence, which means growing your skill, autonomy, which means making meaningful decisions, and relatedness, which means connecting to others. And once again, the small print, different players need different configurations of these elements. And now the last part of my talk is it's called motivation as a basis of sustainability, and see, it's the cynical part. As my most cynical cat says, when you can see clearly the cynical hand, there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. So no matter how great our intentions to keep motivation of our players are, at the end of the day we need to sustain ourselves, we need to sustain our teams, we need to sustain our companies, we need to sustain our businesses. We all can have different business practices, we can have different monetization strategies, but at the end of the day, bold statement number 5. We sell motivation in monetization strategies. With the small print, the higher the motivation is, the more money we can make. This, I realize this sounds fairly cynical, but it's simple like that. The more motivated players you have, the more happy they are, and the more happy they are, the more likely they are actually engage with your monetization strategies. And monetization strategies don't have to be only in-app purchases. It can be buying DLCs, it can be buying expansions, it can be even buying your next game. But all in all, uh, playing into player motivation can help your business. And to make a summary of my bold statements, which I'll kind of sum also the most important thoughts of my talk, are the following. So the first one: never ever put anything in your games which doesn't have a why attached to it. You can explore, you can do wild things, but always think, why are you doing it? What's the goal for it? A second bold statement is that we don't design for fun, we design for specific motivations, and the sooner we discover specific motivations of our players, the more specific and more efficient we can be in our game design or design. The third board statement: playing into player motivation recharges their patience. So when you discover what the drives the engagement of your players, you can be really, really efficient in helping recharging their patience and well, you know, their engagement. A bold statement number four: to stay motivated, we need to feel our skill growing, making new meaningful decisions, and connecting with others. As I said, I really love self-determination theory because it's so simple. It can be summarized with this one sentence. Well, to some degree. I hopefully there are no psychologists listening to this talk, because I will get angry messages. And the fifth and the most important bold statement: because we all are here to sustain ourselves with the work which we adore and love, and it's we can sell player motivation and monetization strategies. So the more motivated and happy players you have, the more potentially successful will your monetization strategies be. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm not. That's all from my side. And now I think we have few minutes left for any kind of questions. Both me and Michael.
Wow, wow, Mark. Thank you so much. Honestly, it was filled with philosophy, psychology. It was filled with personal experience, and it was filled with Leonard.
Of course.
uh, wow, I was writing down some notes because a lot of insightful ideas. Some of them may be bold, yeah, but a lot of insightful ideas. Thank you for that. And I'm personally will wait for this video appear at YouTube because I want to rewatch. I want to uh, think about this one more time. And thank you one more time. Wow.
Thank you for this opportunity. I think it's not exactly hard to see that I'm quite passionate for this topic. So yeah. It's. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak about it, and maybe to show how we can think about our players from different angles.
Mhm. And I have a tricky question for you. You have
Please.
a few bold statements summarized at the final stage of your presentation. But if you need to sum them up to the single one, what it will be?
Know your players.
Mhm.
Know your players. Know, and not only on the surface. Try to connect with your players. And I think I would even say, like, your game is a relationship which you build with your players.
Mhm.
And I think we are, and it used to be that, it's always fascinating as a game dev evolves. And currently, the smallest games, which are released, for example, even on Steam, they have components of service games, because they do updates. They keep kind of the flame alive. They keep the interest of the player bases alive. So I think we got as a gaming industry into a state when we always are connected with our player base, and it's a great way how to sustain our team, to establish a stable relationship with our players. So I guess connect with your players would be.
Uh, you know, uh, Connection and this all connect stuff is the essential part of modern psychology methods because this is the main idea of communication between two people. and I want to embrace your inner teacher. I wanted to thank you for such an amazing experience I've just had, and I believe everyone who are watching us right now, they are also enjoying these insights and these ideas. And thank you for joining us today. First of all, thank you.
Thank you too. If you had at least half of the fun which I had doing the dog, then I think we had a good time.
Yeah, awesome. And I hope to see you next time. Thanks for joining us today, and bye.
Bye.